How's everyone doing today? It is Tuesday, April 21. I hope everybody's doing well. Um, this week we're going to be getting into looking at Arkansas, obviously, since we're in Arkansas history. We're going to look at it during the time of the Great Depression, and we're going to do it through a two part series here. The first part we're going to read two articles, and we're going to answer one question on each article. It will require you to write maybe 2, 3 sentences. It's not necessarily a multiple choice question, but a writing question. But still, at the same time, it should not take you very long. So you might want to highlight, underline things as you read or as you follow along. Take notes as you follow along. I would suggest you scrolling down first. Let's scroll down first and let's look at the questions that we're going to answer. So it seems long, but they're not very long readings. They're very short. And then you get down here to the two questions that you're going to be answering. The first question is over the article Arkansas Before the Great Depression. Question one says there were many problems in Arkansas before the Great Depression. When the Great Depression hits the state of Arkansas, they already are struggling, thus making it harder for Arkansas to handle the problems of the Great Depression. Based on the reading, what occurred in Arkansas prior to the Great Depression to cause economic decline and hardships for the people of Arkansas? So, this question is trying to get us to answer what was going on before the crash on Wall Street and things like that. What was going on in Arkansas before that that makes it even harder for people to get through what was going on in the Great Depression? So, keep that in mind. Okay. The second question that we're going to answer deals with women of Arkansas in the Great Depression. How were women of Arkansas negatively impacted by the workforce and home life due to the effects of the Great Depression? In what ways did women in the state of Arkansas provide assistance during the tough times of the Great Depression? How were young African American women in the state positively impacted during this time? So the first part is how did this depression negatively affect women in the workforce and in their home life because of the Great Depression. Then it's asking what ways did women in the state of Arkansas provide assistance to people? And then the last question asks how young African American women, how this was actually a positive thing during this time. So keep those things in mind as you read and uh, look for things that you could use in that answer. And you'll be able to type your answers down here because I've made a copy for each person to be able to write on. So, again, keep that in mind. So, I'm going to quickly go through here and I am going to read. I'm going to read the first reading and then I'm going to tell you to pause the video and give you a chance to go and answer the questions. And then I will, after pausing, you'll be able to unpause, and I will read the second part. Okay. So here we go. Reading one: Arkansas before the Great Depression. Arkansans faced economic woes for years before the stock market crash of 1929 and the start of the National Great Depression. Dropping cotton prices combined with a major flood in 1927 and a drought in 1930 economically crippled the state. Sharecroppers and tenant farmers, as well as small farmers, depended on a strong harvest to offset money they laid out in advance for goods and services. So any disruption in agricultural production had dire consequences. By the time the stock market crashed, many Arkansans were in financial ruin, unable to pay their taxes. By 1933, nearly 40% of the state's labor force was unemployed. Agriculture was the mainstay for Arkansas families. The Great Flood of 1927 for many wiped out what little hope they had of making better lives for their families. At the flood's height, 13% of the state was underwater. This was a nightmare for the estimated 80% of Arkansans who made their living off of agriculture. Houses, fields, roads, and railroads were destroyed in many areas, bringing the economy and Arkansans' lives to a standstill with no relief in sight. In 1927, there were no extensive coordinated government programs to help with relief, such as welfare, Social Security, or food stamps. With the stock market crash right around the corner, the state was already poorly equipped to deal with further disasters. The next devastating natural disaster to hit Arkansas was the drought of 1930. Crops were devastated and much farmland became worthless. Creditors and merchants began to limit the amount of goods they provided on credit. Food riots brought national attention to the plight of Arkansas families and caused the Red Cross to offer food assistance. Over 165,000 people applied for help within 3 days. Another blow to Arkansas came from the political leaders of the state, who in 1927 passed a measure that required the state to take over county road improvement districts. This required the state to take on a substantial amount of debt. Servicing the debt expended a large percentage of state revenue. When the drought hit in 1930, there was no surplus state money. Merchants and banks began to close their doors, which in turn led to a decrease in tax revenue from these businesses. In November of 1930, 70 banks in the state of Arkansas closed due to insufficient funds. By 1933, nearly half of the banks in the state had been closed. There was no federal deposit insurance at the start of the Depression, so when a bank closed, deposits were lost. All of these factors together led to a vicious circle. No money equals consumers not buying, equals manufacturing produce less goods, equals layoffs and rise in unemployment, equals no money to spend. Okay, so that is the end of the first article. This would be a time now to pause the video and go back to your paper and answer that first question about what was going on in Arkansas before the Depression that made it even harder for Arkansans to recover from the Great Depression. So pause your video and go answer question number 1. Okay, back from doing question 1 on reading 1. Now we're going to do reading 2, and we're going to look at women of Arkansas and the Great Depression. The crash of the stock market late in 1929 ushered in the Great Depression, when a failing economy gripped the nation. Businesses and banks failed, workers lost their jobs, and many families lost their homes. In Arkansas, women struggled to survive and make a life for themselves and their loved ones during this economic disaster. The Depression affected women directly and indirectly. Females comprised a quarter of the workforce and suffered the loss of needed jobs. Married women who worked faced discrimination and public resentment because society viewed them as taking jobs away from men, even though their jobs stayed within the traditional women's sphere. Couples married less frequently because men lacked the ability to support a family. Husbands abandoned their families and left their wives to provide for the family. Arkansans helped the charitable organizations. Arkansans found help in charitable organizations in Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal government programs. In 1935, Arkansas became the first Southern state to fill all its Works Progress Administration slots for women. Throughout the state, in towns such as DeWitt, Paragould, Malvern, and Harrison, WPA workers served hot lunches to school children, made clothes in sewing rooms, tended to the sick in household aid programs, and taught adult education classes. Arkansas also housed one of 5 National Youth Administration camps for young black women sponsored by the WPA. Named for Mary McLeod Bethune, director of the National Youth Administration Negro Division, the camp offered liberal arts and vocational training classes. Arkansas women did more than just seek help during the Depression. They also provided help. They volunteered and contributed to charitable causes. For example, Miss Leona Marks sponsored a health class in Stuttgart taught by Miss Belle Barnett. Topics included how to disinfect a room, the number of bones in the body, and the number of heartbeats per minute. Other women sponsored WPA projects that provided jobs for the female applicants. They also opened their homes to extended family members who had nowhere else to go. Women persevered by doing what they did best. At home, they grew gardens and canned food. They sewed clothes for themselves and children, and when those wore out, they remade the material into something else. They scrimped, saved, and shared. Some worked outside the home, and they all worked inside the home. They survived, lived, and learned during the 1930s and passed on that knowledge to their daughters. Okay, this brings us an end to the readings. Now, looking at that that second question, you can pause it after we finish and answer that second question on your sheet, and you'd be done for the day. But just remember that when you read or listen to this article about women, remember that the 1930s was a much different time than the 2020s. Women were seen as to hold certain roles, and they did not get out of those roles very much. So when you read that, understand that the time in which we are talking about is much different than 2020, when many women are the main breadwinners of their families. Women in the workforce is a common thing. And now women are still fighting for the ability to get paid on an equal way. So things have changed for the better in a lot of ways, but at the same time, they still have not come all the way where they need to be. So understand what you were reading. You were reading about the 1930s, which was a much different time than what we have in today's world. So go ahead and answer question two. Uh, get that finished, get that turned in, and you will be done for the day. So hope everyone is doing well. Have a great day, and we will talk to you later.